Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are proud to bring you Banishing Burnout. Many of us are struggling with pandemic fatigue and feeling depleted by life's current challenges. Tonight's expert will discuss habits to avoid and healthy coping skills to adopt. She will cover self-compassion, mindfulness and meditation, and how to combat negative self-talk. Bridgette Martinez is the Director of Admissions and Utilization Review at Recovery Centers of America. She works at Wheaton Wellness Center, providing counseling for adults and adolescents struggling with various behavioral health disorders. Bridgette is a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified substance abuse counselor. She has been in the healthcare field for over 15 years and has been in the counseling field for 9 years. Bridgette specializes in mindfulness, cognitive behavioral therapy, and self-compassion. Wheaton Wellness Center is a local private practice counseling center with 6 licensed counselors trained in a variety of treatment techniques. Wheaton Wellness Center opened its door 2 years ago and is located in downtown Wheaton. Their staff is passionate about giving back to the community, such as providing presentations like this. So with so much expertise and important information to share with us tonight, Bridgette, we welcome you, and I will hand the floor over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Barry. So yes, tonight we're going to talk about banishing burnout during a pandemic. With that said, while I was putting this presentation together, I realized that this can apply during a pandemic and after a pandemic. So please don't think that this is just limited to the pandemic, but I thought it was important to talk about tonight. So let's get started. I wanted to talk about the different types of burnout. I feel like when we talk about burnout, we talk about burnout in regards to work. And so tonight I want to talk about burnout in different aspects in our life, specifically work and our personal lives. And then I'm going to go over 2 types of self-care, internal and external, right? Internal meaning how do we cope with that internal experience that we're enduring, and then some external coping mechanisms in our environment. I'm really big on cognitive behavior therapy. I do it a lot in my private practice, so I want to go over that with you guys tonight as well. Self-compassion, mindfulness, and meditation. Oftentimes these 2 words get used interchangeably, so I'm going to go over how you can distinguish both of those. And then, of course, habits to avoid, right? I think that's very important. So the different types of burnout. We have individual burnout, right? That's caused by excessive negative self-talk. And as an American culture, we do a lot of that. As human beings, we actually do a lot of that. Neurosis. So we all have that friend that's neurotic, and sometimes that's us. And then perfectionism, placing unrealistic expectations on ourselves. That can burn us out. So with individual burnout, this type of burnout, if not addressed, could lead to depressive symptoms. Negative self-talk is highly correlated with depression. So we definitely want to keep an eye on that. Interpersonal burnout is caused by difficult relationships with others at work or at home. So this is the type of burnout that we can experience in our professional relationships, as well as our intimate relationships, or even with our kids, right? So I thought that was pretty important to talk about tonight. So this little blurb talks about relationships at work. Examples are aggressive or unwelcoming boss that can compound the stress that we already feel at work, right? Especially nowadays. So with this type of burnout, if this isn't addressed, it can lead to acting out behaviors towards our loved ones. And then on the extreme end, it could lead to domestic violence. So we definitely want to pay attention to this one. Organizational burnout is caused by poor organization, extreme demands, and unrealistic deadlines that make you feel like you're missing the mark. So with this one, this is the one that everybody associates with, right? Work burnout. If this isn't addressed, this could lead to the individual burnout that I talked about in the beginning, right? That negative self-thought, negative self-talk, right? Where we start to internalize some of these external experiences that we actually have no control of, right? We don't have control of unrealistic demands that our bosses put on us. But if we don't address the organizational burnout, it could lead to individual burnout, which could lead to depression. So again, something we want to pay attention to. So if burnout is ignored, it can lead to excessive stress, fatigue, insomnia. And I want to talk a little bit about insomnia, specifically sleep. I feel like as a culture in our society, we don't give enough weight to sleep. And here's the thing, sleep allows us to process what has happened during the day. If we're injured or exhausted, we need that sleep, that deep sleep, to repair any tissues and again to process what happened, to make sense of what happened during our day. So I'm always evaluating my clients' sleep patterns in session. I'm always just checking in just to make sure that they're getting sleep. How many hours are they getting? If they're having difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, it's really important. So I just wanted to stress that here in this format. Sadness, anger, irritability, and anxiety, right? That's why we're here. We're here to avoid those, right? Not so much avoid sadness or anxiety, because those are two emotions that are very functional in our life, but to have a better relationship with it. Alcohol and substance misuse. Of course, somebody that has a subspecialty in alcohol and substance abuse, I'm definitely paying attention to that with my clients in session. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in this presentation. Heart disease and high blood pressure. Again, burnout can have an effect on us physically and emotionally. So 2 ways you can engage in self-care to manage burnout. I'm going to talk about two different ways. What I label as external, what we can use in our environment to cope, and then internal, right? How can we cope with those internal experiences that we're having? So for the external, I'm not going to pay as much attention on that. I think some of those are self-explanatory. I do want to pay a little bit more attention on the internal and how we can manage and cope with some of our internal experiences. And of course, I'm going to talk about self-compassion tonight, mindfulness, and meditation. But for our for our extroverted friends, this time when we're social distancing might be difficult for them because they get their batteries recharged being around people. So for those folks, I recommend like doing something like tonight, like a Zoom or a Zoom. What's really popular now? It's the Zoom happy hour. And as a substance abuse counselor, it doesn't always have to be with alcohol. You can just meet up with your friends at a happy hour time. And then of course, being out in being out in nature and exercising. So we're going to talk a lot about the internal way we can cope by paying attention to our thoughts, self-compassion, and meditation. Okay, so as you guys can see, this is called the cognitive triangle or the cognitive triad. And really what this depicts is how our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are all connected. And I use this a lot in my private practice. And usually I like to start up here with folks, right? I want to hear, what their thought patterns are. Usually, especially if they come to me, it's negative, and really the thought patterns aren't helpful. So I'm really paying attention to what they're saying in session to start to identify patterns and then try to find out where they generated from. So we have 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day. I'm not here to tell you or to explain to you how to get rid of those thoughts, it's impossible. I'm telling you, I'm trying to teach you how to have a relationship with them, how to put space between you and those thoughts, because we can't manage 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day. It's 1 to 2 thoughts every 2 seconds. So I do want to help you put space between those thoughts. And here's the thing: we place so much weight on thoughts, and we think that they are the reality. And they're not. They're just thoughts. They're from past experiences, right? From what people have told us that we just kind of made a part of our self-concept. So I like to start up here. And I do have a personal example that I use with my clients, and then I'm going to share with you tonight. And then an example of how one of my clients is using this. So as I said, I like to start up here. And the personal example that I utilize in session is that about 7 to 8 years ago, I was struggling with social anxiety. And then I got invited to spend a day with my friend and her brother on her boat. And I thought that, hey, that's fine. 2 people that I already know, perfect, you know? So the day that we go to launch the boat, there's about 10 people, and I am super nervous. And the first thought that comes to mind is, this is going to be the worst day ever, the worst. And then that fed into my emotional state of anxiety, which fed into the behaviors of me pouting and frowning. And nobody really wants to be around somebody that's pouting and frowning on a boat. So that reinforced the thought, this is the worst day ever. And then that fed into my emotion of anxiety, which then reinforced the behaviors of frowning and pouting. But for some reason, and it might be because I was starting to use this stuff in my life, I had this like shift in my thoughts. And I said to myself, this could be the best day ever, right? That alleviated some of that anxiety. And then my behaviors of frowning and pouting, they started to dissipate. People wanted to talk to me, right? That reinforced the thought that this is the best day ever. I can do this, right? Anxiety started to lift, behavior started to decrease, people continued to want to talk to me. So I use that example with my clients in session to let them know how powerful this could be. Now, I do have a client currently that's struggling with some depressive and anxiety, and that's in regards to some unfinished college coursework. He had to take an incomplete in his coursework last semester because he was struggling with being depressed. And so, of course, he's struggling with a ton of negative self thoughts and really kind of honing in on those. But for him, he started here with the behavior of actually pushing through the emotional state of exhaustion and being overwhelmed. And he started to do his homework, which led to the thoughts of, I could do this, I got this, which decreased the emotional state of depression and anxiety. And then he continued to start doing his homework. So you can start, as you can see with each arrow, you can start at either one of these, right? It's a little bit harder with the emotional state, especially if you're really struggling with intense anxiety. But the example that I can give with that is that to sit with the emotion and to build tolerance can lead to the thoughts that I can do this. I can endure this emotional state, right? And then you'd start to engage in some self-care behaviors or engage in life and not isolate, which would then decrease this emotional state. So you can start from any point. It's what works for you. And here's the thing, you can't do this stuff wrong. So I don't want people to think that there's a right way to do this. All right. So neuroplasticity. I'm so excited about this research. I'm so excited about neuroplasticity, and I'll tell you why. So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change. So About 20 years ago, the thought was when our body stops growing, so does our brain. Well, here's the good news. That is not the case, right? Our brain is actually the only organ that keeps growing. It never stops developing, and that's pretty cool. So if you break down the word neuroplasticity, neuro equals brain slash nervous system. Plasticity comes from the Greek word platosis, which means moldable. So it's moldable brain. And again, it's the ability for our brains to change. We can we have the ability to rewire the connections in our brain through our thoughts, lifestyle, and environment. So the more you do something, the easier it gets, right? So when we were younger, we learned at a rapid pace. Now that we're a little bit older, I'm not for sure the age of everybody here, but now that we're a little bit older, it takes a little bit longer for us to learn, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn, right? So we have these neural pathways in our brain that start to fire off when we engage in a certain behavior. So if you engage in the behavior, those neural pathways will start to get deeper and stronger. And if you stop a certain behavior, those pathways will start to fade away and die off. So we do have the capability, even in adulthood, to learn new behaviors. Um, I always like to use the phrase, the example of riding a bike, right? When you get back on it, it gets easier. But if you don't ride it, it's a little bit difficult to navigate. Or New Year's resolutions, right? We all set a New Year's, most of us, me, um, I set a New Year's resolution every year. And sometimes I give up on it, right? Like dieting or wanting to give up a bad habit. But here's the thing, we've have these neural pathways, especially for habits that we want to get rid of, like not eating as many carbs or sugar. Well, those pathways have been ingrained in our brain for probably a long time. So it's going to take time for those pathways to fade away and dissipate. And then it's going to take time for the new pathways to start to fire off and be strong. So a lot of people just kind of give up because they're not seeing the change right away. And that's because we're not as young as we used to be, right? So we don't have to be the product of our past, and we don't have to be the prisoner of our genes, excuse me. There's hope. There's hope that we can learn new habits and behaviors. If that's one thing that you could take away tonight, I hope you take away that. Don't give up and keep practicing. All right, so one of my favorite topics is self-compassion. So it's just that. It's turning compassion inwards. It's what you would tell a friend in a similar situation. So, when relationships end, when we lose friends, or we lose a job, we tend to sit there and beat ourselves up. And some of the stuff we tell ourselves, we would never tell a friend in that situation. We would never tell a friend, it's your fault. It's because you're not attractive, you're fat. But we would never tell a friend that, but we sit there and we beat ourselves up and we tell ourselves that. So whenever I introduce self-compassion to a client, I tell them, I want you to ask yourself when you're in one of those situations, what would you tell a friend, right? So it's a 3-part process. It's to be kind to ourselves, common humanity, and mindfulness. So being kind to ourselves is taking that first question that I posed to you, what would you tell a friend in a similar situation? And then I want you to start telling yourself that, right? Here's the thing, if we aren't compassionate towards ourselves, we're going to start to run low on compassion towards others, right? It's that concept when you're on a plane and the stewardess comes over and you have your child or somebody next to you, and they're like, now if the oxygen mask comes down, put it on you before you put it on the person next to you or your kid, right? That's the same concept. You have to be compassionate towards yourself or you're not going to be able to take care of others, or you're going to low run on compassion towards others. So then the common humanity piece, right? We tend to think that we're the only ones in pain and suffering. And then we start to isolate, and that isolation can exacerbate the pain. We all suffer, we all have pain. And it's reminding ourselves of that. It's reminding ourselves that when somebody loses a loved one or loses a job, that they hurt too, and that we're not alone. So it's reminding ourselves of the common humanity piece. And then in order to know that we're in pain, we have to be aware, and that's where mindfulness comes in. And then I'll go over the definition of mindfulness, I believe, in the next slide. So self-compassion is skill. What we practice grows stronger, right? Going back to the neuroplasticity piece, right? We can learn this. We can learn to turn into the positive thoughts and to be compassionate towards ourselves. It takes time and practice. What you practice grows stronger. So if you practice self-compassion, it will get easier to do. So I find that clients have a hard time with this because they have a hard time articulating self-compassion phrases. Now, the phrases I'm going to give you are, you might not connect with, but it's just a starting point. This is very individualized. So some of the self-compassion phrases that I've come up with clients in session, and then some that I utilize in my own life are, and you would say this quietly to yourself: I'm here for you, even in all your hurt and pain. This hurts, and I will get through this. I'm not alone in the pain, and I will survive this. So the key to coming up with a self-compassion phrase that I found is to be able to identify that emotion, right? Being in pain or sadness or even irritability. And then validating that. So it's validating it and giving yourself hope. Like, I will survive. I got this. It sucks, but I'll get through it. So that's self-compassion. And this is self-compassion continued. So this is one of my favorite acronyms to go over with clients and that I utilize in my life. And that's RAIN. And RAIN stands for recognizing. We want to recognize the emotion. So this can be hard. This is going to be, good when we're trying to work through difficult emotions. So we want to recognize the emotion, right? By labeling it. We can label it whatever it is, right? Sadness, anxiety, hurt, overwhelmed, or exhausted. And then we're going to acknowledge it with a yes, right? This is key. So yes, I'm in pain. Yes, this hurts. And then I always ask my clients to investigate where they are, where they hold their emotional tension in their body, right? So investigate is to explore where that is in your body, right? Most people carried it in their head, right? They get headaches, especially when they're anxious. They carry it in their neck, their shoulders, get really tight. For me, it's in my chest. Some people carry it in their stomach, and it's just recognizing where that is. And then that takes us to the N, the nurture. What do we need in that moment, right? Do we need to say some self-compassion phrases and then rub our chest right over our heart? Do we need to say some self-compassion phrases and rub our temples on our head or hold our cheeks? Really, nurturing is just going back to the basics. What did we, as a child, all we really needed was our mom to comfort us, to tell us that it was going to be okay, to put a blanket on us. And as we get older, we forget that. And it's really just getting back to the basics. It's really just that touch and that loving kindness to ourselves. So like I said, I utilize this in my life. And one time I had a period in my life where I was just feeling exhausted and overwhelmed all the time. And it was really having an impact on my ability to function. So I ran across this acronym in the Calm app. So if you guys ever have the Calm app, there's a master class on radical self-compassion, and Tara Brach is the one that pioneered this. So I definitely would highly recommend that, and some of her books as well. So I was feeling exhausted, overwhelmed. So I worked through rain, and I really recognized the emotion of being exhausted and overwhelmed and sad. And I acknowledged it with a yes. Yes, Bridgette, you're exhausted, overwhelmed. I investigated where I was feeling that particular emotion in my body. And for me at the time, it was in my head. I was feeling really foggy, and my head just, it felt like I had a ton of weight on it. And so the nurture piece for me was to rub my temples, tell myself that it was going to be okay, and then to take a nap, because I think at that point I was just really exhausted and I needed a nap. So that's how I've utilized it in my life. And again, there's no right or wrong way. You can start from any place depending on your emotional state. Maybe it's the nurture you need, right? Maybe you're super anxious and you need to do some breath work. We'll go over breath work a little bit later as well. Um, so it's, or you just need to investigate where you feel it in your body. So you can start wherever you want, the R, the A, the I, the N. So mindfulness versus meditation, another favorite topic of mine. So people use these words like interchangeably, and they're really two distinct words. So mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment, not judgmentally. Now, those are a lot of words to say awareness, right? That's really what it boils down to, is just being aware. And meditation is a formal practice that allows us to be an active observer of our thoughts. Again, we're not trying to change the thoughts. We're just trying to put space between us and the thoughts and have a better relationship with them. So it's a time that we actually set aside to be the active observer of our thoughts and to become in tune with our emotional state. So, how I like to explain it is meditation helps us lead a more mindful lifestyle. So, mindfulness is a lifestyle. So, you can be mindful while you're eating, you can be mindful about your words, you can be mindful while you're in the shower. So that's an informal practice. It's what we hope to achieve as a lifestyle, and meditation will help us get there. So let's see. There's different types of meditation. There's concentration meditation, Jyoti meditation, which I utilize a lot. It's meditation that you meditate you meditate with the light within. We all have that light within us. And so you're meditating to that. A walking meditation, it's good for our folks that like to be out and about and are very active. Guided meditation, which I'm going to show you tonight. We're going to do a guided meditation. And then one of the things that I wanted to point out about the definition of mindfulness is the non-judgmental piece, right? So it's not that we don't have judgments, because we're human beings. Of course, we're going to have judgments. It's not judging the fact that we have judgments and just being aware of it. And the key to meditation is that, again, we're not trying to get rid of these thoughts. When I explain meditation to my clients, I use the leaf on the stream meditation. Or analogy, and we're going to actually do the leaf on the stream guided meditation tonight. But the key to meditation is catching yourself wandering, right? So we're going to wander, and it's catching yourself doing that, being mindful of that, and then bringing yourself back to the present moment, either with a mantra meditation, with the guided meditation, for me, when I do a Jyoti meditation, it's bringing myself back to that light within. And again, I probably wander a lot, right? Depending on how my day went. And if it was chaotic, I'm probably have a lot of thoughts about it. So when I go into meditation, I'm aware of that. And I don't sit there and beat myself up if I wander a lot. Again, going back to the neuroplasticity and self compassion, what we practice grows stronger. So if I'm doing a meditation and I'm sitting there and I'm beating myself up or I'm judging myself, then I'm going to grow that stronger. And I'm going to correlate that with meditation. So it's really being compassionate towards yourself in a meditation and then not beating yourself up if you start to wander. All right. So with that, those definitions, I'd like to have us engage in a short 5-minute guided meditation.
Forward, we are a new kind of doctor's office that's doing primary care differently.
This activity is called Leaves on a Stream, and it's an exercise from acceptance and commitment therapy. This exercise helps you develop the ability to separate yourself from your thoughts, noticing them and observing them instead of becoming sucked into them. You are not your thoughts. You have the ability to observe your thoughts. This is called cognitive diffusion, which is just a big word for saying getting unstuck from your thoughts. So let's begin our practice. Sit in a comfortable position and either close your eyes or rest them gently on a fixed spot in the room. Take a breath and notice what it feels like to breathe. Allow yourself to become aware of the present moment. Notice what the chair feels like pressing into your legs. Notice your breath. Notice the sounds around you. Imagine yourself sitting beside a gently flowing stream with leaves floating along the surface of the water. Notice what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it smells like. During this exercise, thoughts are going to pop into and out of your head. With the first thought that comes in, imagine placing that thought on a leaf and allow that leaf to float on by. With each thought that comes, whether the thought is happy or sad, enjoyable or uncomfortable, place that thought on a leaf and let that leaf float down the stream. If thoughts pop into your mind like, this is dumb, or I'm bored, or I'm not doing this right, just notice those thoughts and place them on leaves too. Let them pass down the stream without getting too wrapped up in believing them or trying to make them go away. During the spaces between thoughts, just envision yourself watching the stream. Sooner or later, your thoughts will start up again. And with each thought that does come up, just gently place it on a leaf and let it pass down the stream. Allow the stream to flow at its own pace. Don't try to speed it up and rush your thoughts along. You're not trying to rush the leads along or get rid of your thoughts. You're allowing them to come and go at their own pace. And your job is to notice them and allow them to come and go without getting too wrapped up in them. If a leaf does get stuck, allow it to hang around until it's ready to float by. If the thought comes up again, watch it float by another time. If a difficult or painful feeling arises, just acknowledge it. Say to yourself, I notice myself having a feeling of boredom or impatience or frustration or whatever it is. Place those thoughts on leaves and allow them to float on by. From time to time, your thoughts may hook and distract you from being fully present in this exercise. This is normal. As soon as you realize that you have become sidetracked, just gently bring yourself back to watching your thoughts and placing them as if they were leaves on a stream. As we come to the end of this activity, take one more look at your stream and your surroundings. Imagine what it sounds like, feels like to be there. And then gradually come back into your body here in the present moment. Notice the chair pressing against your legs. Notice what it feels like to breathe. And you're welcome to open your eyes. Take a moment to reflect back on this. What was it like for you to notice yourself thinking? It's really normal to find yourself struggling to remain present and mindful. We are all constantly pulled by distraction, and that's okay. Be gentle with yourself as you work to pull your awareness back to noticing thoughts. Each difficulty that you may have faced during this exercise is an opportunity to grow and practice the skill of present moment awareness and noticing your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me. Please.
All right, so it's one of my favorite guided meditations. I use that a lot in session with my clients. I had a client once struggling with thoughts of her boss who used to bully her, and she just was hopeless about it. She's like, what do I do with it? I'm like, well, when they come and they arise, just put it on a leaf and let it float away. Now, here's the thing. It's probably going to come back. You just got to put it back on that leaf and let it float off. You'll see that the intensity and the frequency will subside. Another takeaway that I want everybody to take away from this presentation is, nothing lasts forever. Nothing, and that's even including our emotional states and these thoughts. They will fade away. It might suck in the moment. It will pass. So just keeping that in mind when you're in a difficult situation, to remind yourself, this is temporary. I'll get through this, right? Well, self-compassion. So, next slide is about how to foster meditation practice in your daily routines. So you want to create a distractive-free environment. I have a client that utilizes his closet. I guess it's really clean and neat, and you can get a lot of silence in there. So it's coming up with creative ways to make a distractive-free environment. Decide on what time works best for you. The recommendation is mornings. Here's the thing, I'm not a morning person. So I do my meditations right before I go to bed. So it's what works best for you. Maybe you are a morning person. I think the logic and rationale behind doing it in the morning is that we are not taking all the experiences from our day. We're kind of at like a blank slate in terms of like how many thoughts we have. So people find it best to do it first thing in the morning. Again, it's just what works best for you and your schedule. Determine what length based on your experience. So I would definitely recommend 5 minutes. The research shows that if you do it for 12 minutes or more, you're going to start to reap the benefits of meditation, increase focus, being able to manage your emotional states better. So the recommendation is 12 minutes. You can work up to that. The key is to practice, right? What you practice grows stronger, and to just do it daily. So you want to figure out what type of meditation you want to focus in on. Do you want to do breath meditation, meditation? You would come up with at least 3 words, no more than 4, and they have to be positive. So my mantra that I engage in when I want to change up my meditation practice is love, peace, and happiness. So you definitely want it to be something you want to attract in your life. And we just engaged in a guided meditation, and the key is if you caught yourself wandering, to bring yourself back to the words that the facilitator of the meditation is saying, or the sounds. The reason why I liked that last meditation was because of the sounds of the water, and it just helps me bring myself back to that sound. And of course, be compassionate, right? We don't want to sit there and breed self-judgment and negativity. So it takes 21 days to learn a new habit and 90 days for it to become a lifestyle. Okay. Oh, breath work. So this is gaining a lot of popularity these days, and it works. It calms your nervous system. It helps with focus, decrease reactivity, emotional reactivity. It's free. You can do it anywhere. So the 2 breath exercises I wanted to go over with you is the moon piercing breath and then the 4-7-8 breath. And both of these help with relaxation. And if you're struggling with insomnia, these 2 are really good to do. It might not be appropriate for individuals that are struggling with depression and are really just exhausted and fatigued. So this is going to help with calming the nervous system, and their nervous system is probably pretty calm. So I don't recommend that. So the moon piercing breath technique. So the thought behind this is it's based in a yoga perspective, that the left side really taps into our qualities of intuitiveness and restfulness and calmness. So the exercise, and as you can see on my slideshow, what she's doing. So what you want to do is bend your ring finger, your middle finger, and pointed finger down. And all that's going to be left is your pinky finger and thumb. And you're going to put your thumb on your right nostril, breathe in through your left, and then you're going to put your pinky finger on your left nostril and breathe out through your right. And you're going to want to do this for a count of 4 for 10 rounds. If you need additional time, you could do a count of 8. You want to work up to that on each nostril, a count of 8, and then you can do up to 30 rounds. And that really does help people to settle down and relax. And then the 4-7-8 breathing exercise is you're going to breathe in for 4 counts, and then hold it for 7, and then breathe out for 8. So it's breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you would repeat that, and you could do that up to 10 times too. For the sake of time, I'm not going to show you the YouTube video on how to do the moon piercing breath, but it's on YouTube, so it's really accessible. So external ways, we talked a lot about internal ways of managing and self-care, coping with our internal experiences. And these are some ways that you can engage engage in ways in your environment to help with in a difficult emotional state. So hobbies that help you recharge your battery. So we have our extroverts and our introverts, and extroverts need to be around people. And again, it's tougher in these times, but be creative with it. And then your introverts probably aren't doing that bad now. They tend to get their battery recharged when they're around few people or even by themselves. And so for them, that's going to look different. Surround yourself with people that you enjoy to be around. I wouldn't surround yourself with negative people. Nature, where do you like to have fun? What brings you joy? Breath work. And then again, how do you cope with stressful situations? And these are going to be individualized as well. Habits to avoid. So habits to avoid. Binging on Netflix. And I know people are like, what? Yes, we have to try to avoid binging on Netflix. First of all, it isolates us, and it really starts to, we start to avoid our lives by binging on Netflix. And so I know that it's probably easy during these times, but again, to go back to the neuroplasticity piece of this, is that if that is how you're learning to cope, then you're going to start to build those neural pathways in your brains to fire off when you're stressed out. Oh, I can just, utilize Netflix. No, we want you to be out, and we want you to be living your life. And that's hard when you're cooped up in the house binging on Netflix. And of course, being a substance abuse counselor, I have to bring this up. Avoid using substances to cope. And again, you're going to learn this as a coping mechanism, and it's going to be really hard to unlearn, because substances like alcohol, it works, right? It's very effective in alleviating our anxiety and our depressive symptoms, right? With that said, there's a lot of negative consequences, especially when it becomes a lifestyle. There's consequences on our relationships. There's consequences at work, and especially on our health, especially if we're talking alcohol. So we want to avoid abusing substances or using substances to cope, because we're just going to learn that as a behavior, and we're going to associate alcohol or any form of substance as a way to alleviate an emotional state. And it takes a lot to unwire those connections, if you will. Using food as a reward or distraction, the same concept as abusing substances, right? We're going to start to associate food with ways to alleviate stress. Social media, I'm guilty of this. It's kind of like binging on Netflix, right? Where you just resort to your social media account to just drown things out and to distract yourself from whatever emotion you want to distract yourself with, or you just want to distract. I'm not trying to say don't watch Netflix. I'm not trying to say don't have a glass of wine. Or use your social media, because I'm guilty of it. It should not be a form of a coping mechanism for you. That's all I ask, is don't utilize it as a coping mechanism. Utilize some of the stuff we talked about tonight. So I am done, and I think we're going to take questions.
Thank you so much, Bridgette. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this program has been recorded so people can refer back to it, and you have a number of great references here. And I did copy down the links to the two practices that you mentioned, and I will include the links to those YouTube videos in that follow-up email as well, so that those participants don't need to worry about copying those down. Again, I just remind everyone to go ahead and open up your Q&A window so that you have a chance to ask questions. And Bridgette, while we're waiting for some of those to come in, I'm wondering, you mentioned the Calm app. I'm wondering if there are any other apps or tools like that you might recommend.
Yeah, so depending on what type of phone you have will determine whether or not some of these apps are free. But there's free apps where you don't have to pay for anything. Calm app is definitely good, but a little pricey. So it just depends on what type of phone you have. I have Headspace too, and then some other free apps. So you would just look at your Play Store or your Apple Store.
Great. Great. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions, especially for students or teens, with this tumultuous school year. They've had a tough time. Maybe they're behind in their schoolwork. Any particular recommendations?
I think we're referring back to the cognitive behavior therapy. Really, if it's schoolwork, it's pushing through some of those hard emotions and doing the schoolwork, which would help with some of the negative self-thoughts. But it could be that depending on the individual struggling, that they could start with the thoughts and start to use some self-compassion phrases to help alleviate the thoughts. That's going to help with the emotions. So it just depends.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Someone else is recommending Andrew Johnson's meditation app, especially they comment that sometimes the accents can be a real draw in listening to
It's true. I agree. And the gender of the person, sometimes you can connect better with a certain gender. So it's really very much about preference.
Right. And I know from my own experience, sometimes they have music in the background or nature sounds or just the voice. And so there are lots of options out there. Yeah. Someone else is asking, Bridgette, with regards to that internal negative chatter, how would you describe the distancing technique? Or could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So the distancing technique, first of all, the exercise is to be aware. Some people just go on automatic pilot and they take the negative self-thoughts as self-concepts, right? So the first step is being aware of it. And that's where mindfulness and meditation come in. What are those what am I telling myself, right? And I tell my clients to actually have some external cues in their environment, such as a doorknob. Every time you touch a doorknob, I want you to check into what you're saying to yourself, right? What are those thoughts? And then that right there, it just allows them to check in and be aware. And then the labeling will help you create space. Oh, those are just thoughts, right? So it's really labeling it and being aware of it, and you can use some external cues in your environment to check in throughout the day. So like sometimes I tell clients, if they're take a drink of water, check in. What are they thinking? What are they telling themselves? So I think that's an approach that I would take.
Great. Thank you. And we did talk for a moment about students, and someone else is asking about recommendations maybe for the really young kids.
As far as meditation exercises?
I think so, or maybe some of the mindfulness practices or something that can help them if they're starting to feel anxious or overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's multiple books online. I have books on audio that I listen to. I feel like kids can connect to that more. So I would suggest anything on kid-friendly on Audible, or looking at your your Play Store to buy kid-friendly meditation apps.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. I will say we'll allow people just one more minute to enter any questions that they might have, but just a reminder that this program has been recorded, and so you can watch it again or recommend it to a friend. It will be uploaded onto the library's YouTube page within just a day or two. I will also be sending out the link to the Wheaton Wellness Center's website, as well as the links to those videos that Bridgette talked about during the presentation tonight, so that you can access those. If you are watching the recording of this program and would like those links, please email me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE like community engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. I think that is all of the questions at this point. So thank you so much, Bridgette, for all of the time and effort that went into tonight's presentation. And thank you to everyone who participated tonight. We hope everybody is able to stay healthy. Take care and good night.